Good evening, everyone. My name is Jill Dash, and welcome to the third and final evening of our WBA Symposium, Women and Leadership. I am the immediate past president of the Women's Bar Association, and I am also the vice president of strategic engagement at the American Constitution Society. We have had some great conversations over the past few weeks during this symposium. I hope that you learned something new or gained inspiration, which we know we could all use during a time like this in these really challenging moments. We started the symposium with remarks from our keynote speaker, Colleen Jenkins, and followed with a great discussion, carrying and passing the torch, a roundtable with remarkable women leaders. And indeed, they absolutely were. Last week, we set out on parallel tracks, one with junior lawyers, breaking in, advocating for yourself early in your career, and then the other for more senior lawyers, passing it on, how to be an ally and mentor in senior management. Finally, this evening, we get to honor our wonderful Woman Lawyer of the Year, and we'll hear from some other superstars who bear that title. We will hear from the wonderful president of our Women's Bar Association Foundation and also honor our recent speech competition award winners. Before I get to our speakers, I want to thank the committee who graciously volunteered themselves or allowed themselves to be voluntold to put this all together. And those folks are Jessica Almond, Ashley Boucher, Lauren Brown, Gafar Chowdhury, Ann Collier, Renee Lauren Ellis, Candace Gibson, Miranda Hallett, Emily Lagan, Bridget Bailey Lipscomb, Kate Neville, Bridget Richardson, and Sasha Hodge-Wren. And as you can see, as with many things, it takes a village, and it was wonderful to have everybody pulling together so that we can have this wonderful programming. And I want to again recognize and thank our sponsors for their support, without whom the WBA simply could not prosper. And those sponsors are at the leadership level, Paul, Weiss, Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison. At the benefactor level, Freddie Mac and T-Mobile. At the underwriter level, Wilkie Farr and Gallagher, McCrae Incorporated, and Brian Cave, Leighton Paisner, LLP. And before I hand it over to my wonderful colleague, Rachel, I want to say thank you to our current president, Sadina Montani, whose support throughout this process has been unwavering. And thank you also to our executive director, Carol Montoya, and her staff, who helped pull together all of the details over these past few weeks. And now let me hand things over to Rachel Hardwick, our WBA Foundation president.
Good evening. I am Rachel Hardwick, the proud president of the WBA Foundation. Giving to the foundation is always an act of resistance, and it's even more important in these times. The WBA Foundation works to meet the legal needs of women and girls in the DC area, assert their legal rights in areas of domestic violence, trafficking, and fair employment. Many recipients of these services are women with families, and many are women of color. We are so thankful for the consistent support of our WBA sisters and friends in the entire DC legal community. Consider making a monthly donation to the foundation and ask your firm or your employer to match your gift. And please ask your company to sponsor our events. The women served by the resources we jointly pool need us more than ever. Donate tonight by going to wbaf.kindful.com. You'll be able to find the link in the chat box. That's wbaf.kindful.com. No amount is too small. I'm pleased to introduce a video highlighting some of our grantees and their work and the work of the WBA Foundation. Enjoy it and enjoy the rest of the evening, and thank you so very much.
It is said that the year 2020 will be one for the history books. Our current climate has magnified the social and economic disparities across the globe. However, even in the midst of it all, there's one thing that remains constant. That is the continued tireless effort our grantees put forth day to day in various communities across the DC Metro. One might ask, what does it take to do this work? It takes passion. It takes drive. It takes self-motivation. The WBA Foundation honors those who continue to answer the call.
My work at the clinic is not what I do, it's who I am. And I think it's a great opportunity to work in a place where I have tremendous colleagues and clients who never cease to amaze and inspire all of us.
At the Legal Aid Society, we provide services to residents of the District of Columbia and an array of different areas of the law, including family law, domestic violence, public benefits, housing, and those types of areas of the law.
The Safe Sister Circle provides culturally specific, holistic, and trauma-informed services to Black women survivors of domestic violence and sexual abuse living primarily, but not exclusively, in Wards 7 and 8.
Well, this year, Legal Counsel for the Elderly, or LCE as we're also known, turns 45. And the free legal and social work services we provide are even more critical today than they were in 1975. We do this work because we want to give back to the community. I personally want to make sure that elder individuals in the District of Columbia are well taken care of.
African Communities Together is a nonprofit organization that provides pro bono immigration legal services for the DC and Maryland and Virginia. My passion comes from knowing the immigration process and how hard it is if you don't get proper services and going through, especially in the current climate, having an attorney and making sure that you are assisted accordingly throughout that process. Life is already hard enough to adjust. We just, the biggest thing that you can do is making sure that you have filed and make sure that you are screened and have used all your options properly.
First Shift Justice Project's mission is to help working mothers keep their jobs. There is a need that's unmet in terms of helping working mothers stay employed. In a lot of ways, they're more vulnerable to losing their jobs because they can be fired for pregnancy, they can be fired because of domestic violence. They're denied accommodations that they need and leave that they need, and they have this other caregiver responsibility that interferes sometimes with their ability to be kind of this generic worker, like a robot that can go to work at a certain time every day and leave at a certain time every day without any changes.
Thank you all so much for having me here tonight. I think like many of you, I had one of those days where everything was on fire and I had to take care of things and I was answering emails. And it's such a treat to take a step back and listen to what these grantee organizations do, because it really is inspiring to hear what they're doing and how they're helping all these people in our community.
I've been at Bread for the City for 12 years, working on domestic violence cases. And what I like about that from the legal perspective is we don't just represent people in civil protection order cases, so we're able to actually take the client through other family law needs they may have.
I love helping people. I'm a survivor myself of domestic violence, and it's very rewarding to help other people with the tools that I have.
I find it very empowering to see, to be able to help women that are in vulnerable situations who feel like that they don't have a way out of a bad situation with their partners. It feels great to help them get out of that situation and see their strength and see them evolve into their full potential.
WBA funding is really important to us. It makes a major difference to us because we are small. Any dollar helps, any dollar counts. There's really just two of us, and we do everything together, and we use all our funding really efficiently.
This is work that not only I'm so happy to be doing, and I'm so grateful that this foundation is giving us the grant so I can continue doing this work, but it's so great for our clients and the survivors of domestic violence.
Having funding from the foundation that supports our ability to really, have the capacity to have these special projects done is really critical to making sure we can do our mission day to day.
I look at the organizations that we're honoring, and I think to myself, it's what motivates people to get up and come into work in the morning, because they know they're doing the right thing, they know they're supporting a cause they believe in. And when people get into their day-to-day jobs and they move away from the world, like prosecuting cases like that, you sort of forget what it's like to be in the trenches. And coming back into the world where you're working with organizations like that means a lot, because it is part of who you are, and I don't think you ever lose it.
I see the Women's Bar Association Foundation getting bigger and better and helping more people. We currently have a national recognition, and we get funding from all over the country now. And in the future, I see it growing even more, because it's very evident that we're making an impact and we're changing lives.
It is
Good evening, everyone. I'm Candace Beck, a board member of the Women's Bar Association and co-chair of the Future Leaders Committee. I want to begin by thanking the Women's Bar Association Foundation for its generous support of our WBA first ever high school speech competition. The foundation actually gave us the monetary awards for tonight's winners, so thank you very much. The WBA is committed to engaging youth in the community with experiences that help develop critical thinking and presentation skills. We've held 2 mock trial events for children aged 8 to 13 in the past few years. And this year we launched our first ever high school speech competition. Initially it was to be held in person, but we were able to switch to virtual model when we realized that that just was not going to be possible because of COVID. This year's topic was, are school dress codes discriminatory? We want to congratulate all of our speakers for their hard work and their true commitment to this topic. As always, these competition decisions are tough to make, and I also want to thank our competition judges for all of their volunteer time and going through the speeches and giving their feedback. We had 2 categories for entry, the novice division and the experienced division. The winner of the novice division will receive a $100 award and have her speech printed in the WBA's next Raising the Bar newsletter. The winner of this year's novice division is Fiona Shepard. Fiona is a sophomore at Yorktown High School in Arlington, Virginia. Hi, Fiona. She is a member of the Lincoln Douglas speech and debate team and a reporter at the Yorktown School newspaper. She runs cross country and track, and outside of school, she takes voice and piano lessons and loves to hike with her family. Please welcome Fiona for a few words.
Hi, I'm Fiona Shepard, and I just want to thank the Women's Bar Association for this incredible opportunity. It has been a really awesome experience, and I really enjoyed this whole thing. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Fiona, and congratulations. Now I'm going to move on to the Experience Division. The Experience Division winner receives the monetary award of $100, and her speech will also be printed in the next Raising the Bar newsletter. But tonight we also have the honor of hearing an excerpt from her speech. So the winner of this year's Experience Division of the high school speech competition is Savannah Wright. Savannah is a sophomore at School Without Walls in Washington, D.C. Hi, Savannah. She is currently a member of her school's public forum debate team. And since 7th grade, she has competed in speech events, policy debate, public forum debate, and Lincoln Douglas debate. She also loves to play the piano, listen to music, and go longboarding, which just sounds amazing. Her favorite school subject is biology. So please join me in congratulating and welcoming our experience level winner, Savannah Wright. Thanks, Savannah.
Thank you so much. Let me tell you a story. In 7th grade, 2 of my friends went shopping together. They came to school that Monday wearing the exact same pair of pants. Now, my school dress code was pretty standard. Shorts, skirts, and rips in jeans had to be fingertip length. No spaghetti straps, no midriff, and no leggings were allowed. The pants that my friends had bought were jeggings, the appearance of jeans with the soft, stretchy fabric of leggings. Technically, these pants did not meet the school dress code, but when my friends wore them, only one of them got dress coded. The first of my friends, the one who got away with her outfit, was built very small and thin. The other friend who got asked to change was significantly curvier and heavier set. This is just one example of how today's dress codes teach children that having a body that doesn't meet a specific standard is inappropriate, and this message is unfairly directed towards people with curvy bodies and girls, hence being discriminatory. Because of the way that different bodies fill clothes, dress codes bring up obstacles for plus-size children that do not affect thinner children. For example, many dress codes state that clothes cannot be too tight, but it is much harder for a curvy person to follow this rule than it is for a thin person because clothes are quite literally engineered to fit the bodies of thin people, leaving bigger people struggling to find clothes that fit well. Curvy and plus-size kids are much more limited than thin kids when it comes to clothing choices. Another way that dress codes restrict plus-size bodies is through adultification. This is when people assign a grown-up sexuality to youth. Curvy people are most likely to be victims to this occurrence because their curves make them appear older. This leads to over-sexualization of children who may be as young as 8 or 9. Because of this over-sexualization, plus-size kids are more likely than thin kids to be told that their clothes are too provocative. And if this is the case, then what does that say about the school's values? It seems like they just prefer if you were skinny. This brings up a whole other host of issues with the school's ethics. Young people are disproportionately likely to be affected by fat phobia and to be driven into low self-esteem, body issues, and even disordered eating. The way that dress codes are written and enforced, be it purposefully or inadvertently, suggests that plus-size bodies are unacceptable. Dress codes also fundamentally discriminate against girls. Schools frequently claim that dress codes exist because showing too much skin is not appropriate in a learning environment or because it can be distracting. However, by normalizing shaming people for showing skin, boys are taught that it is okay to sexually harass or assault others, and boys' supposed education is prioritized over girls' mental health, education, and safety. An article published in the Huffington Post in 2017 discusses how dress codes teach girls that they must cover up their bodies. It takes an interesting stance regarding why these dress codes exist. After questioning why dress codes often single out girls, they come to the following conclusion. Herein lies the problem. Dress codes are not about clothes. They're about control. Dress codes are made under the pretense that they will apply to all students, but really they target girls. This adds to a still growing idea that girls' bodies are inappropriate and that clothes or lack thereof can justify assault. We create dress codes to control people from a very young age, to teach victims that their bodies are things to be ashamed of, and offenders that their actions are okay. In conclusion, dress codes are clearly discriminatory, particularly on the basis of body type and gender. They contribute to a global culture of belittling and marginalization of these groups, and change is needed. A more helpful dress code would be banning clothes that depict violence or hate speech. While many schools include rules like these in their dress codes, the majority do not, and they should, because that will teach the impressionable futures of our world to be decent and kind. Many people defend dress codes by saying that school is for learning, not for dressing provocatively. If school is for learning, we should teach youth to stop caring so much about skirt lengths and spaghetti straps and instead to care about making the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Savannah, and thank you so much, Fiona and Candace, for running that fantastic program. And I know you had many partners in crime. We really appreciate all of you being here. And may I also take the MC's and immediate past president privilege to say, as a former speech and debate student from high school and college, it really warms my heart to see this pipeline of supporting folks doing this work and then coming to the WBA. So be careful, Savannah, because we're going to recruit you to be WBA president before you know it, as we do with so many people who come around these parts. Anyway, okay, well, speaking of people that we've brought into the fold, it is now an absolute thrill to introduce to you our process for Woman Lawyer of the Year. In fall of 2019, the WBA Awards Committee gathered to consider nominees for the Woman Lawyer of the Year award. These folks perform a great service to the WBA and the legal community more broadly, finding just the right person to honor and add to the incredibly esteemed group of people who we've honored since 1965. I'd like to recognize this past year's committee. Our chair, Carrie Castellini, who was our 2017-2018 WBA president. Sonia Murphy, our 2016-2017 WBA president. Yolanda Hawkins Bautista, our 2018-2019 WBA president. Kirsten Wilkerson, our WBA Foundation representative. Anna Reyes, 2017 Woman Lawyer of the Year. And Judy Lichtman, 1989 Woman Lawyer of the Year, who was called back to service and very graciously agreed. Thank you to all of those women for leading us in this process. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce to you the Honorable Judith Rogers of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit, who will in turn say a few words about this year's Woman Lawyer of the Year, Jeannie Rhee. Judge Rogers was appointed to the United States Court of Appeals in March of 1994. She had previously served on the District of Columbia Court of Appeals since 1983, becoming Chief Judge in 1988. Following her graduation from Radcliffe College and Harvard Law School, she served as an Assistant United States Attorney. Sorry, lost my page there. Sorry, everybody. Judge Rogers served as an Assistant United States Attorney. And before that, she served in the Justice Department in the Deputy Attorney General's Office in the Criminal Division. Then, after serving as General Counsel to the Congressional Commission on the Organization of the District of Columbia, she worked for the Mayor of the District of Columbia on congressional and local legislation. She became the Corporation Counsel for the District of Columbia in 1979 and served until her appointment to the bench in 1983. In 1988, Judge Rogers received a Master of Laws degree from the University of Virginia Law School. Most importantly, Judge Rogers was the Woman Lawyer of the Year in 1990. And so it is an absolute delight that she can join us this year to introduce our awardee. Judge Rogers, let me hand it over to you. Judge, I think you might be on mute. There you go.
Thank you for those gracious remarks, Jill. It's an honor to be here with all of the members of the Women's Bar, many of whom I know well, and we have prospered and labored in the field for years. But I am delighted and honored to introduce Jeannie S. Rhee, the Woman Lawyer of the Year of 2020. To know of her professional accomplishments is to be awed. Partner in 2 major law firms, now on the hiring committee and formerly on the Committee on Diversity, the Compensation Committee, the Senior Associates Committee. Then in 2017, Special Counsel at the Department of Justice, heading up the Russian team in the Mueller investigation and responsible for indictments against Russian military officers, companies, and nationals for email hacking, information warfare through social media, and against Roger Stone for lying to Congress and obstructing justice in connection with his testimony about interactions with WikiLeaks, and obtaining guilty pleas from George Papadopoulos for lying to the FBI about his Russian contacts, and from Michael Cohen for lying to Congress about his efforts to advance a Trump Tower in Moscow project. Prior to that, in the Office of Legal Counsel at the Department of Justice, as Deputy Assistant Attorney General, she advised the White House and senior executive branch officials on constitutional, statutory, and regulatory issues regarding criminal law and procedure, executive privilege, civil rights, immigration, and national security. Prior to that, in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of Columbia for 5 or 6 years, her work as trial counsel was renowned, and in a corruption prosecution of officials of the Washington, D.C. Teachers Union, her work caused the trial judge to comment when the trial was done that she was terrific. After clerking for Judge Stanley Sporkin on the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia from 1997 to 98, Jeannie clerked for me. Then on to the Office of Policy Development in the Justice Department, and later as a legislative fellow in the Office of the Senate Majority Leader while on detail from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Likely, many of you know more than I about Jeannie's work as an investigator and litigator. So I thought you might be interested to know what I knew of her when she was my law clerk for the 1998-99 term, and a little about how I think that worked out. She had graduated from Yale College summa cum laude, majoring in history. Her transcript revealed a not unusual assortment of courses, but she had taken tough courses, including economics. By her junior year, she was studying developmental areas in the law involving women in the 20th century, Blacks in the law, race and ethnicity, sexuality and intimate relationships, civil rights, and liberties. As a writing sample, she submitted an excerpt from a forthcoming article revisiting the 1993 sexual harassment lawsuit brought by former waitresses against Hooters restaurants, seeking to impose employer liability for customers' sexual harassment. Eminent law professors wrote me that she was a standout and that her written papers were consistently clear and original, noting that this was a rare combination. Another professor referenced her prodigious research and stated that her final draft of a paper that was published was truly superb. Another professor described her work in a seminar that was doctrinal as well as historical and theoretical in an effort to bring together sexuality themes in areas of law usually treated separately. He described Jeannie as outstanding in several different ways. Her oral comments were outstanding because she came to class with the best thought out theory and had pertinent factual and personal insights at her fingertips. Her oral comments were highly analytical and cogent. Notably, this professor observed that, quote, her intellectual intensity is her great strength, close quote. To check whether any of this academic praise had carried over to the real world, however cloistered you may think appellate courts are, I recently went back to examine some of the pre-argument memoranda that Jeannie wrote for me as a law clerk. There were no surprises. In complicated administrative cases, for instance, her writing was clear, concise, and she presented cogent analyses. As I recall, her oral comments were of a like nature, clear and focused. She was intellectually curious, I suspect at times intensely so. Significantly, however, what my review brought back to mind was something that is illustrated in her published article on the Hooters litigation. She focuses on an issue, reviews the relevant law, analyzes what were the suggested analytical frameworks, and then, as appropriate in addressing questions of first impression and developing areas of the law, proposed an alternative vision. In her article, she described her alternative vision as one that protects against sexual harassment without a concurrent repression of sexuality. That's brilliant and is the type of jurisprudential study and legal analysis that can advance the ball. It eliminates unnecessary clashes between proponents while remaining focused on the goal, and thereby strengthens a negotiation and litigation strategy. Her clerkship demonstrates two things about the Woman of the Year. First, her subsequent professional accomplishments have come as no surprise to me after working closely with her for a year early in her career. She's covered an amazing amount of extraordinary ground as a young professional, and there is undoubtedly more seminal work to come from her. I may know little of the details of the work she does for her clients, but how she has conducted herself professionally is evident from those governmental activities about which the public is sometimes informed. And it is evident surely from the fact that she keeps being called upon to work on important matters for important reasons by important people and entities, which speaks volumes about the respect for her legal ability and integrity that she enjoys in the legal community. Second, Jeannie was prepared to personify the opportunities that an earlier generation of women hoped would open for superb lawyers who happened to be women. As a law school graduate of an earlier generation, I looked to models such as Patricia M. Wald, who became the first woman on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, and to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who joined her there, and to Sandra Day O'Connor, the first woman on the Supreme Court, whom Judge Ginsburg joined. Their path-breaking work and their real-world smarts about how to succeed in the law in a man's world were instructive. They, among other women lawyers, joined by some men, expanded legal protections in otherwise neglected areas, involving the rights of juveniles and of the mentally ill, and the rights of women, as well as reforms in the criminal law and procedure. Jeannie's accomplishment tracked the work of these outstanding women of yore and already has gone way beyond their notable pre-judicial accomplishments. She has captured the legal establishment and become an integral part of it, an important participant in it. And she has done so while remaining true to her principles. She has real-world smarts too. Not only does she excel in the work she is doing, I personally know that she is fun to work with and has a delightful sense of humor and an infectious laugh. She makes friends easily and she keeps them, and they love her for it. She also has a supportive husband, Chris, and two smart sons, Oliver and Linus. Not bad. By her professional accomplishments in her own right, she is a stellar example for other lawyers and certainly a most fitting recipient of the Women's Bar Association's prestigious award. Many, many congratulations, Jeannie.
Okay, Judge, you missed my laughing and cheering up and reacting through all of that. I mean, my goodness, I'm utterly speechless. Thank you, Judge. And really, I cannot thank you enough for your generous remarks. Although my immediate reaction as you were going through the recitation is, first, that's what my professor said about me. It only took me 25 years to find out. And then two was, oh my goodness, I really can't keep a job because that's a lot of jobs that I've had in the intervening years. I want to really thank everybody, and particularly the Women's Bar Association and the nominating committee for honoring me this year. It's really humbling to be amongst a really distinguished list of prior recipients of this award. I've had the great fortune when I went back through the roster of the prior recipients of having worked very directly for 3 women on the recent list. Judge Rogers, Jamie Gorelick, and L.D. Atchison. And over the course of my career, they've all been really valued mentors throughout all of my stops along the way. And I'm really honored to be following in their footsteps. At a suitable and respectful distance, of course, because I certainly don't want to get ahead of myself. There are others on this list when I went back through it who I know only by their stellar reputations. And really, the list represents just an extraordinary breadth and depth of people here in the bar. I will note on a personal level, there's one recipient who I saw on the list who shall remain nameless, who hired our family babysitter out from under me. Although in fairness, I don't think she realized it at the time. I'm pleased to report that I've gotten over that. Jill mentioned that Judge Rogers was the Women Bar Association's Woman of the Year 30 years ago now in 1990. And although we're separated by just a few decades, Judge Rogers' experience as a lawyer starting out was radically different. I would note when I graduated in 1997, my law school class was close to 50-50 men and women. Judge Rogers graduated from the Harvard Law School class of 1964 with she was one of 15 women in a class of well over 500 men. Those women in the judges' class were by definition extraordinary. Her classmates included 2 future presidential candidates, both also honored as Women Lawyers of the Year by the Bar Association, Senator Elizabeth Dole and Congresswoman Pat Schroeder. A dear friend of the judges and another fellow classmate of that legendary law school class wrote a book about their collective experiences at Harvard. And in that book, the judge recalled, and I quote, "The men seemed to have their lives all planned out. Many wanted to end up with Wall Street firms. Others, inspired by the Kennedy rhetoric, wanted to serve in the government. One man told the judge at the start of law school that he would be governor one day. And when classes began, the judge observed many of the boys taking notes in leather-bound notebooks. They told her they wanted to make a permanent record of the beginning of their successful careers." What this award and really this organization and the judge represent to me is the antithesis of that kind of thinking. Lawyers who, instead of talking about what they're going to do one day, put their heads down and go about the business of doing. The Women's Bar Association of DC includes those of us who ended up at Wall Street firms, who served in the government, who got elected to office. And all along the way, we face the obstacles and the challenges that exist even as the most visible barriers have started to crumble. I said earlier that a great deal has changed in just the few decades that intervene between Judge Rogers' graduation and mine. And that is a true testament to the painstaking work of all the amazing women, some of whom the judge noted, who have paved the way. But it's also true that a lot of things still haven't changed. And that's why organizations like the Women's Bar Association of DC are so critical. Early in my career, when I was finishing up my clerkship for Judge Rogers, she was kind and generous and thoughtful enough to invite me to the DC Circuit Judicial Conference. Judge, I don't know if you remember this. I remember when I received that invitation, feeling a tremendous sense of awe and pride as a young lawyer to get to be around so many luminaries of the legal profession here in town. And I remember feeling completely deflated when, during a cocktail party one evening at the conference, a prominent lawyer came up to me and asked if I was a nanny for one of the judges after seeing me interact with his children. My husband, a young lawyer who had clerked on the court with me, was able to attend the conference as my guest. Let me underscore that last part. He was there as my guest because I had received the invitation from Judge Rogers. He too was at the cocktail party, and he too was bent down interacting with the children. And yet his presence at the conference was unremarkable. Nobody came up to him. He went unquestioned, as to be expected. That experience with me as a reminder of what someone like me has to get past to succeed. Fast forward 2 decades to 2018, I was working, as the judge noted, in the Office of Special Counsel for Bob Mueller. I was the lead prosecutor of the team charged with investigating Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. And although I oversaw a large team of prosecutors and FBI agents and analysts, I would try, whenever possible, to sit in on important witness interviews. On one such occasion, I quietly entered the room. The witness turned to me and asked, "Are you the stenographer?" I politely responded no, and I smiled. And the male prosecutor who was leading the interview sheepishly then introduced me as his boss. I tell these anecdotes not because I want to dwell on the hardships of being a minority woman practicing law in the nation's capital, or because I want in any way to celebrate victimhood. It's to the contrary. I think it's critical to be honest about the work that still lies before all of us. And it's important to embrace the successes of women in this profession who persevere day in and day out. Sadly, as we all know, there's nothing at all unique about my own stories. And there's a power that comes from recognizing that truth and celebrating all of the people here who share that lived experience. And so I want to conclude by saying that I am so grateful to be in the company virtually of so many motivated and accomplished women. And I want to pay tribute to someone who isn't here with us any longer, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Of course, everybody on the call knows that before she became one of the country's preeminent jurists, she single-handedly shaped our equal protection jurisprudence as a Supreme Court advocate. And here's how she described her very first Supreme Court argument. "I did not dare eat anything because I was afraid I wouldn't keep it down. I was very nervous. I had a first sentence written out, memorized. And then I looked up at the bench and thought, here are the most important judges in the country, maybe the world, and they have to listen to me. I had a captive audience. And suddenly, instead of getting nervous, I had a sense of empowerment. I knew a lot more discrimination than the 9 of them did." I've always found this story to be refreshingly honest and inspiring. We have a sense of empowerment should we choose to harness it. And despite the challenges we face, we have a captive audience. And on Justice Ginsburg's behalf and our own, let us all keep up the good fight. Thank you again so much for this honor and this privilege.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. I have to say, you're thanking us for the honor, but I have to, when the board voted on your nomination, it was a no-brainer. It did not take very long for us to know that we had found a wonderful person to honor, and being with you makes me feel empowered. So I want to thank you for that. It is wonderful to have you among us, and we've already warned you that once we get you in our ranks, we don't let you go. We brought Judge Rogers back from 1990. We brought Judy Lichtman back for the committee. So you will not go far. I've already recruited Savannah. So thank you so much for being here. And as I said to Colleen when we kicked off the symposium, I wish I could give you a hug on the stage the way it was supposed to be. But as soon as that's appropriate, your hug is coming, like it or not. All right. Before I get further choked up, thank you for that, Jeannie. Let me get ready to turn things over to our illustrious president, Sadina Montani. She has many titles, but president of the Women's Bar Association for 2020-2021 is the most important one to me, and dear friend, of course. She is also a partner at Crowell and Mooring in the labor and employment practice. She works with employers to ensure compliant and respectful workplaces, manage and mitigate risk, prevent litigation, and in litigation when necessary. She counsels and conducts training programs for employers on all types of employment-related issues, and has spent a lot of time this year helping employers navigate the varied and complex legal issues presented by the COVID-19 pandemic. She routinely conducts challenging internal investigations and has a particular expertise in investigating and managing allegations of sexual harassment. Prior to law school, Sadina spent her early 20s as a starving artist. See, think about what you did in your 20s. I was not nearly this creative or productive. Sadina was a freelance musician and performed with the Lansing Symphony Orchestra, the Southwest Michigan Symphony Orchestra, and the South Bend Symphony Orchestra, among others. She tells me this is a little known fact, so thank you for joining us tonight to learn this. She appears on 3 albums recorded on the Naxos American Classics label with the Hot Springs Music Festival, and studied at Interlochen Arts Camp and Meadowmount School of Music. And so with that, I give you our wonderful president, Sadina Montani.
Well, thank you, Jill. And I have to say, even having spent so much of my formative years, or so many of my formative years, learning how to get over stage fright, I can't help but be nervous to be taking the stage after hearing from Judge Rogers and from Jeannie. And what an incredible night this has been so far. I am really delighted to have the opportunity to close out our 3-week Women in Leadership Symposium by moderating this panel featuring 4 fantastic WBA Women Lawyers of the Year. We will be joined, I'm excited to share with you for this discussion, we'll be joined by Rhee, from whom you just heard those amazing remarks, as well as 3 other past women lawyer honorees. Let me start by introducing Kim Keenan. Kim Keenan was our 2007 Woman Lawyer of the Year. Kim is a mediator and arbitrator with JAMS. She serves as Executive Vice President of Marketing and Research and General Counsel for Odyssey Media. She is the first female co-chair of the Internet Innovation Alliance, a broad-based coalition of business and nonprofit organizations working to ensure every American has access to broadband internet. Previously, she served as the president and CEO of Multicultural Media, Telecom, and Internet Council, a nonprofit with the mission of improving access and diversity in the telecom industry. Before that, Kim served as the 9th General Counsel and Secretary of the NAACP, the oldest, the largest, and the most recognized grassroots civil rights organization in the world. She is the longest serving female general counsel in the 112-year history of the NAACP. She also is a past president of the DC Bar and a past president of the National Bar Association, the largest coalition of African American lawyers, judges, law professors, and law students. The American Bar Association designated Kim as a rebel in the law in 2019. The UVA named her as a change agent. She has so many awards, too many to list here, and I'm probably already embarrassing her. Kim, we're so excited to have you with us this evening. We also were joined by Anna Reyes, who was our 2017 Woman Lawyer of the Year. Anna is a partner at Williams & Connolly, where she co-chairs the firm's International Disputes Practice Group and is a member of its executive committee. She focuses her practice on complex litigation and international arbitration. She has handled matters involving foreign governments, foreign officials, multinational corporations, international organizations, and clients throughout the world. Along with her admissions to the bars in the United States, she also is listed on the roll of solicitors in England and Wales. She's been named by Legal 500 as a next generation lawyer in international disputes and by Benchmark Litigation as a local litigation star in both international arbitration and products liability. And she's been named by the National Law Journal in its winning litigators list, in its outstanding women lawyers list, as one of its DC rising stars and one of the top 40 minority lawyers under 40 in the country. Anna, what an amazing CV you have. We are also so excited to have you with us tonight.
Thanks. I long for the days when I was still allowed to be 40 under 40 of anything.
And last but absolutely not least, Marna Tucker was our 1985 Woman Lawyer of the Year. Marna is the founder and senior partner of Feldesman, Tucker, Leifer, and Fidell. Marna has practiced in the law of domestic relations for almost 50 years, and she is a nationwide expert in complex divorces, domestic violence, and prenuptial matters. I would probably spend the next hour that we have going through all of Marna's awards, but let me just identify a few so that we can appreciate how impressive she also is. She's been recognized several times as one of the top divorce lawyers by the Washingtonian magazine, and she was recognized as one of the top divorce lawyers in the nation by Town and Country magazine. The Legal Times recently honored her as one of Washington's 90 greatest lawyers in the last 30 years. She was the first woman president of the DC Bar and the first woman president of the National Conference of Bar Presidents. She chaired the Federal Judicial Center Foundation Board, having been appointed by Chief Justice William Rehnquist. Marna also chaired the Fellows of the American Bar Foundation and various ABA commissions. She was a founding board member of the National Women's Law Center. She has been honored by the ABA with the prestigious Margaret Brent Women Lawyers of Achievement Award and the Robert Drinan Distinguished Service Award. She also received the National Organization for Women's Intrepid Woman Award in 2008. Marna, we are so excited to have you here. And Jeannie, welcome to this incredibly esteemed club of past and present and past Women Lawyers of the Year. We are delighted to have you all with us, and what a wonderful way to end this 3-week series. So as we've just heard, each of you has had such incredibly interesting and varied careers. I wanted to just start by asking each of you to share with us an unexpected turn that your career has taken that you didn't realize at the time would actually be a really significant and meaningful turning point. So Marna, I would like to start this conversation with you.
Unmuted.
You are unmuted. Welcome.
Well, I think the thing that surprised me the most is I certainly didn't start out to be a matrimonial lawyer. I started out early in my career with the Neighborhood Legal Services Program, which had just started under Lyndon Johnson's poverty program. I then went from there. Most of my career was wanting to work representing the poor. And I started with what was then a public interest law firm, which where we were doing public interest cases. We still had to make a little money since those weren't producing much. And at the time, I represented a woman who was a worked in a large law firm, but headed the secretarial pool. And she said, "Can you help me with my divorce?" And I said, "I'll try." I had not done much divorce work before, but it was something to do. Well, I represented her, and it turned out that her boyfriend was a managing partner of this firm, and he ended up needing a divorce lawyer. And that case turned out to be one of the biggest divorce cases in the city. And after that, I became an expert on one case. So that was an unlikely turn, but I'm glad it worked out that way.
Well, I would say that it worked out. Obviously, it's worked out, but it's what a great story of seeing an opportunity and really leaning into it and finding a path for yourself. Jeannie,
one quick thing.
Of course.
I did not take your nanny.
Well, now we can start to narrow down.
Totally know that you did not.
Oh, that's fantastic. Jeannie, let's hear from you. You were commenting on how many different jobs the judge noted that you had had. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, having just moved law firms a few weeks ago. But I think it'd be great, knowing how interesting your career has been and how many interesting turns it's taken. If there's one that you can identify as really setting you on a track that was unexpected and really meaningful.
Actually, it's a great question, and I think the best answer I have is the job that I didn't get, that I desperately wanted. Coming out of the clerkship for the judge on the DC circuit, the kind of one singular job that it seemed like everybody was applying for that year was as an attorney advisor at the Office of Legal Counsel. And all the clerks who are coming out of the courthouse and clerks from around the country were all applying for this coveted job. And I got an interview, but I did not get the position. And a very dear friend of mine did. And so it was hard to wallow in it. But I remember thinking at the time, if only I had gotten this job. And in fact, when the rest of those years then unfolded, it was a great outcome. I had no business trying to be an attorney advisor at OLC, and I ended up doing things that were much better suited to my both skill set and my interest. And then life has a funny way of coming full circle because, fast forward 15 plus years, I got asked at the start of the Obama administration to come in and interview for a political position as a deputy in the Office of Legal Counsel. So there you go.
Well, a little bit later than you had hoped for to be with the organization, but all's well, I guess it ends well. Kim, let's hear from you about a turn that your career took that at the time you didn't realize would be as meaningful as it was.
So I had my own firm, and I had been the biggest firm in Washington. I had been in a small boutique firm in Washington, and then I had started my own firm. And 3 years in, I get this call from a headhunter, and he's like, we have a national search to pick the general counsel of the NAACP. And I was like, oh, I know everyone. I was, by that point, I had. I think I was like bar president, and I had been NBA president. I was like, oh, I know everyone. I'll give you some names. And I was just so excited, right? It never dawned on me that he was calling to ask me to apply. And so I hang up from him. I don't give it another thought. I get a phone call from two judges, one from New York, one from DC. And they're like, we thought you, not someone else. And I was like, me? It just kept going, me? Really? And then I kept thinking, Thurgood Marshall, me? And then finally what happened was my mind started to think through what it would be like if I were general counsel and what I would do and how I would do it. And then after a while, it was like I had convinced myself. And so 3 months of interviews, and I became general counsel of the NAACP, and it was a life changing experience. It's that moment, you know, when you're young and you want to be a lawyer and you haven't become a lawyer and you think this is what it'll be like, right? I'll solve problems. I'll meet people all over the world, actually, and I'll do all these amazing things. The only thing is you do it on steroids. You work 25/8. That's what I used to say. I work 25/8, 25 hours a day, 8 days a week. And the day you get off is like Easter, like only when, you know, Christ rises again does people, you know, does your phone stop ringing. So so it was an amazing, I cherish it. I really cherish that time that I was there because I really got to do everything I ever wanted to do as a lawyer. So sometimes when the phone call happens, you got to think maybe they're calling for me.
That's fantastic. I think we could do actually a separate panel just on your experience. Definitely putting you on the spot in front of all of these people, but I'm going to be calling you for that because I think we want to hear all those stories. Anna, let's hear from you on this point.
Yeah, I was a second or third year associate. I was in my office minding my own business, and a conflict check went around to represent the Republic of Uruguay in an international arbitration. And I responded to the person who sent the check. I was like, hey, I was born in Uruguay. I didn't think anything of it. It's just, you know, doesn't often come around. And he wrote back about 2 seconds later saying, great, you're on the case. And now 15 years later, you know, my practice is basically representing foreign countries and international disputes and international arbitration. And not only did I represent Uruguay, but after we left Uruguay, we moved to Spain before we moved to Kentucky. And now I currently represent Spain in litigation. So it's pretty cool. I need to take a page out of Jeannie's book and represent the US at the DOJ at some point so I can have the trifecta. You know, sometimes it's just coincidence or really great luck.
Well, and if there are any young lawyers listening who don't pay attention to any of the conflicts checks that go around on a daily basis at law firms, a good reminder to actually pay attention to those things and raise your hand. So Jill mentioned earlier that last week we were on dual tracks, and we had one track that was focused on more senior leaders and how they can be allies. And then we had a separate junior track, which I had the pleasure of moderating, that was really geared towards advice that we would give to younger attorneys. One of the themes that really came out of that discussion was about self-advocacy. So I wanted to continue that theme because it was such a robust conversation, and it was clear that it was resonating with everyone, including the panelists, and I certainly got a lot out of that discussion as well. So I was hoping to hear from each of you about examples of self-advocacy that have struck with you, either times when you have engaged in self-advocacy on your own behalf, or you've seen colleagues do that and do that successfully. And I thought that, you know, Kim, in light of the fact you just shared, the story you just shared about not realizing that the phone call was coming for you, I thought we might start with you and hear your thoughts on self-advocacy.
So I think it's appropriate to tell an associate story. You know, after you've been in your career long enough, self-advocacy is kind of just what you do. But I think the first time I really remember just really standing up for myself, I was a young associate at a very big firm, and I always worked late. I mean, you just knew that if you looked in Kim Keenan's office, she was there. And this particular night, a senior associate was looking for somebody, and of course he happened upon me because I really had one of the closest offices to him. And it turned out that this is how he approached me. He said, "My secretary has a party tonight and she's not here, and I need copies made. And basically I'm asking you to make them." Now, we didn't even work together. We'd never done a project together. I don't know what he was working on because I didn't get to work with him. And here he is asking me to make copies. And at first I snatched up the papers and I made what had to be the worst set of copies ever. I mean, if they were supposed to be collated, they weren't. I was probably snatching them out of the machine. Who knows what I did. So I go to his office with this mishmash of paper, and I say to him, I close the door, I go in his office, because there were people around, but just not a lot of lawyers. I close the door, I'm still standing, I look him in the eye and I say, I'm a team player. I'm here to do whatever it takes for our clients to make sure they have the best results. But I am not a secretary, and you guys don't pay me to be a secretary. So I just wanted to be clear that if it's helping out a colleague, I'm here for that. But if it's just, I'm a random woman walking through the halls and you need copies made, I'm not the one. And, you know, I look back on that and it could have gone really bad, but it turned out that it was like I really showed him who I was, and I was very transparent. I wasn't shrill, I wasn't loud. You know, nobody could have heard the conversation. And I think he was so struck by that he became like my best, you know, ally. Talk about a champion. He helped me with my writing was better because of him. He gave me more assignments. I had billable hours out the Yahoo because he had all kinds of work. And I really appreciated that. And if you had said to me as a young associate, go into somebody's office and tell them you're not taking that and they'll give you more work, I would have said, no, that's not even possible. But that's what happened. And again, to this day, I credit him with sharp writing skills and just opportunity. He gave me the opportunity to bill hours and just so you have a time period, I started at a firm at the height of lawyering, right? I got like 10 summer associate offers and, you know, 5 jobs. But by now it was the 90s and it was the biggest layoffs in Washington. So now here I am, you know, saying this to this guy, and he's giving me so much billable hours that nobody's ever going to lay me off because it would cost too much. So you just never know what can happen.
That's amazing. Self-advocacy and I think authenticity, which is another theme that came out of the session. So I'm not sure if you were with us, Kim, but you were hitting on all of the high points. So thank you. Thank you for being on theme there. Anna, how about you?
Yeah, so I get this question a lot, or we have a lot of presentations about advocating for yourself, asked to do this, asked to do that. And I always think that that's a great question. And obviously Kim's experience is a fantastic A+ answer. But I always think that question sort of misses the mark, because I think that if you have confidence in your abilities and confidence in yourself, you're naturally going to self-advocate. You're naturally going to ask for the opportunities. And I think sometimes we don't talk enough about how to overcome the imposter syndrome. And I think that that's the first step to self-advocacy. You can't say, I'm the best person for the job out loud if you don't believe it internally. So what I did, you know, I just started looking around and thinking, I'm pretty good at this. I'm at least as good as the other people in the room at this. And I started to actually believe that, as opposed to sitting in a room thinking, what am I doing here? Which I did for a long time. And I think that once you get that sense of, I've got arguments under my belt, I know I can take a deposition, I know I can examine witnesses at trial. Can I be better? Yes, absolutely. But do I belong in the room? Yes. And once you get that under your belt and you actually internalize that and believe it, I think naturally you're going to ask, because you're going to want those opportunities. You're not going to be scared of them. It's a lot better, you know, examining a witness than sitting at your desk doing discovery letters. So, but you have to really believe it, and then you go out and do it. And I know that that's not a great anecdote, but I do think that my own self-advocacy improved dramatically over time as I got better sense of self and better sort of confidence in my own abilities.
Well, so one of the things we talked about was the imposter syndrome last week, and I shared a shameless plug for a book that I've read twice in the past month since I moved law firms. It's called The Empress Has No Clothes. It's fantastic. It's written by Joyce Roche, who is a business leader, an African-American woman it's a blend of memoir and stories about self-advocacy and the imposter syndrome. So I recommended it to that group. I promise she doesn't have me on retainer, but it's one that I've been spending a lot of time with lately. So I think that's really right in terms of, you know, how we can address the underlying issue, you know, along with examining kind of examples of modeling our behavior.
Yeah, and I'll just say really briefly, I rented a place for a week just to be in a different part of town or a different place amidst COVID, and I invited my mom out, and so she's been around me, and you know, we're all on Zoom calls all day. And last night she said, "It seems like your job consists mainly of being on calls where the men talk a lot. You pay attention. Every once in a while you say something, then there's resolution and people move on." And I think one of the things to note is that it's quality of what you're thinking and what you're saying, and not just the fact that a lot of people are thinking big thoughts that don't go anywhere. You know, the fact that there's a lot of people talking a lot doesn't mean that you don't belong in the room. It doesn't mean that you don't have things to say too.
Fantastic. I laugh at what my mother would say if she, as an employment lawyer, if she could listen to what I'm doing on a daily basis and comment on that. That's fantastic. As we were preparing for this panel, Marna, you and I were chatting a little bit about your experiences in self-advocacy, but really with an eye towards what your experiences were serving as the first woman in so many roles, and people coming to you and how you found yourself advocating for yourself in ways that was unexpected. And I wondered if you'd share a little bit of those experiences with us.
Right. Well, I was fortunate enough to be the first woman president of the DC Bar, and that meant so much to women in an unexpected way to me. I was so surprised at the number of women who weren't necessarily lawyers, who would write me letters and send invitations. The Nurses Association asked me to speak, different groups, and I said, well, I'm going to speak to anybody who asks me to. And I did, and I made a lot of contacts during that year, and I developed a lot of skills. But one of the things that happened after that was a reporter wanted to write an article, and he decided he would follow me around and followed me to the courthouse. And he wrote a front page article for the Washington Post magazine. And it was called The Diva of Divorce. Now, the speech to the nurses group led to this guy, and he wrote this article. And that article was on the front page on January 3rd, 1993, I guess. And when it appeared, I got a phone call on Sunday morning, and this voice said, Marna, this is Bill Clinton. How did you get such good press? It was his first day in the White House, and he came over and asked me to come over and visit. And I walked into the Oval Office. He's in a sports shirt with all his buddies around. One thing on the desk, the article with my name. And he said, will you autograph it for me? So I learned, talk wherever you can. You never know where it's going to lead.
That's amazing. I don't know that any of the rest of the panelists have any stories that end with being beckoned into the White House to ask to autograph something. Marna, I think you've got us all beat. But we'll end with Jeannie on this question. And Jeannie, having to follow up that story is your punishment for Jill and I having to follow your incredible remarks.
So I think we can all assume that Jeannie has not been asked to the Oval Office to autograph anything.
Not so much, no. not so much.
I'll guess.
I got nothing. I think we should move on to the next question.
I just want to jump in and say thank you to Marna. I mean, she was first, I'm eighth. And in part because during the time of that anecdote I was telling you about, this is when Marna was president. And it was really empowering to see her. It had, she's petite of stature, but when you meet her, she's about the tallest person you could meet. So we just want to say thank you because she is a light. I mean, in everything I've ever done with her, I've always felt like it was like she was just sort of welcoming you there and supporting you. And that's a lesson for women to learn. She could have been first and distant and difficult and, and if she was a diva, it was the good diva. And so I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and thank you for offering those thoughts and for getting Jeannie off the hook of having to answer that question, Kim. We will move on. I wanted to talk a little bit about where we are now, notwithstanding Jeannie not getting invitations to the White House, but in terms of the pandemic and how this is shaping the legal profession and how formative I think it likely will be for particularly young lawyers who are just learning to practice now and setting their habits and learning what it means. campaigns. There was a McKinsey study that came out recently that was looking at women in corporate America generally, not specific to the legal field, but a lot of the data in there was incredibly interesting and compelling. And I wanted to share some of it with the folks who joined us and also hear some of your thoughts. And there was data presented that related to women generally and then to mothers in particular. And for the data that related to women in general, it reflected that women were 1.5 times more likely at this point, 9 months or so into the pandemic, to already feel burned out and to be considering departing their profession. And Black women were more than 2 times likely as women overall to say that the death of a loved one has been their biggest challenge during the pandemic. And sort of a related data point that I'll flag and then open it up to talk about this piece of things is that it separately looked at the potential impact on allyship in corporate America as a result of losing potentially women in leadership and other positions. And the data showed that more than 50% of senior level women say that they consistently take a public stand for gender and for racial equity at work. And the number was under 40% for senior level men. So, you think about all of the potential ramifications of this period, of the burnout that all women are facing, regardless of family care issues. And one of them, interestingly, is potentially losing allies for other women, for women of color, for all people of color, for people in the LGBTQ community, for disabled friends. There's just a lot to unpack here. And luckily, I'm not serving on the panel. I'm the one asking the questions. So I would love to hear, what keeps you all up at night in terms of how this is potentially going to adversely affect women, and if you think there are any silver linings that may come out of it. Jeannie, let's start with you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just really feel for, especially I think the younger women who have young children through this really trying period of time. It's hard in the best of circumstances, and these are circumstances. And I think that what the data reflects is a real lived experience. And Anna, I'm sure everybody here has seen it play out in their institutions, at their law firms, right, at their companies, where women disproportionately have tended to be hit because all the burdens of everybody else within their households have fallen to them, in addition to trying to keep up with business as usual. And, for as much as, just to maybe circuitously answer the last question, I mean, yes, we all need to advocate for ourselves, but you know what? A little advocacy for others, on behalf of others, it never hurt. And I think now more than ever is the time for those of us who have gotten enough gray hairs along the way to be in positions where we can speak up and talk out and call out the circumstances where things are not easy for all folks, but particularly for women and for women of color, and to say, you know what, to our colleagues, and particularly our male colleagues, ease up, guys.
That's great. Kim, what are your thoughts on this? Well, this mess?
Everybody needs a wife. And unfortunately for most women, they're the professional and they're the wife. They're the wife at home, the person who makes sure that everything is perfect in someone else's life. But now they have to do them simultaneously, right? It used to be, right, your kids went to school, your husband went to work, and then you went to work, and you had that time in the car, it may not seem sexy until you don't have it anymore. And then, of course, you had the time, you could have lunch, maybe not every day, of course, but you could have lunch with people, you could have dinner with people, and then come home and pick it all up again. But now you got to juggle it and then get on the call with all these guys, and they might have a dog barking in the background, or they might, be closed off in their office. But, women don't really get that kind of, sort of a shield around them that, people don't feel like whatever you're doing, you could be doing something else. So I do think it's a lot more pressure for women. And even if you don't have, a lot of people at home, you may have a lot of people who rely on you. You may be, taking care of parents. I mean, there's always all these things, but now you're doing them simultaneously. So I do think that women have to be much more thoughtful about their mental health, much more thoughtful about what they need to survive that. So whether it's yoga or whether it's a walk, just getting out of the house and putting on that mask and walking around the building or the house or the backyard, I think it's super important that women not see this as a moment to put on a cape, more like a moment to lay that cape in the closet and leave it there, because you've got to use a different toolkit.
I like to come at that from a slightly different perspective. It's a lesson I learned when my daughter, who's now 45, was 5 years old, and it was about control. And we women, when we're given all these responsibilities, tend to take control. And when we take it, we're not so free to give it up. And I remember when my husband, I went away to my first trip out of town. My husband, who at that time was also a lawyer, said he would take care of our daughter, Cecily. And every night when I was away, I called him up. I said, well, what did Cecily wear to nursery school today? What did you feed her? What did you pack in her lunch? And every night I do the same thing. And when I got back from the trip, I said, what did she wear? He said, oh, the purple polka dot thing. And he said, I don't know. And then he stopped and he said, Marna Tucker. He said, when I am with our daughter, she will always be clothed. She will always be fed. She will always be loved. But when she's with me, I do it my way and get off my back. And I will tell you, that chill to me was the best lesson I ever learned. 45 years later, my daughter is fine. Maybe her fashion sense is more like her dad's than mine. But the fact is, letting him bear the burdens that I was bearing too, I had to give up control. And if we realize you can ask them to do it and release it. That's my lesson.
Okay, I'm friends with your daughter, and on Cecily's behalf, I need to object. Her fashion sense is falling.
That's funny.
Sorry, dear.
Anna, did you have anything that you wanted to add on to this point?
Yeah, I think if anyone thought about it for 2 seconds and thinks of, in March and thinks about it for 2 seconds now, they would know that having to be inside all day, not being able to travel, having to deal with childcare and house responsibilities is going to be difficult for women and men, certainly far more for women. And I don't think that there's any way around that other than for the leadership at companies, at law firms, to not only recognize that, but to say to everyone at the firms, this is an issue we're all facing. We're going to face this together as an entity, and we are going to have each other's backs. And when people can't take their load of work because of problems with being at home or with childcare, with whatever, we're going to help each other. And some of us are going to be busier at some times than other times. And we're going to just do the best we can to get through this together as a team, representing the clients as best we can and helping each other as best we can. Like Kim said, we're all always in this together for the client and as teams. And if that is not coming from leadership, then the firm is going to have a real problem, because without it, people are going to our partners will always ask associates for more time. Associates will always think they have to give more time. at our firm, Joe Petrosinelli, the chair of our firm, he has a monthly Zoom meeting with the staff and with the associates. And we obviously have our monthly partnership meetings. And he reiterates that point every single time to everyone. We are not expecting you to build what you've built in the past. We know there will be times you can't commit what you want to commit or what you've been used to committing. Just let us know. We'll help you. We're all going to get through this. And, we've been doing things as a firm, the little things that help. I was on Facebook the other day and I saw that someone had posted that their firm had sent cupcakes around to all the families for the first day of school. And I thought, well, that's a really great idea. We should do that. And then I saw it, who posted, and I realized we had done it. It was someone at our firm. So, and I think that that's consistent with what we've tried to do, which it's the little things. We have a lot of little things that we, give people, try to do people. Sometimes one of our staff, I think in April or May, coordinated for anyone who wanted it to get a pizza delivery that day. So we had like a firm-wide pizza delivery to homes. And it's little things like that that can help. But really, at the end of the day, it has to be the tone of the top from leadership that we are in unprecedented times and we owe it to each other as colleagues and we owe it to our clients to help each other through it as best we can. And then I internalize that every day with my own teams. There are times when I know that certain individuals can't be doing what I need them to be doing. And I do it myself or I have other people do it. And, we all take turns and that's the best way to get through.
Well, you make some interesting points. And this is a situation where we're seeing like the convergence of self-advocacy and allyship and the importance of leadership, all of those things really coming together. And it dovetails nicely on some other data that I'll show, and then we can move on from the rather depressing topic of the pandemic. But with regard to mothers in particular, this McKinsey study said that mothers were 1.5 times more likely to be uncomfortable sharing the work-life balance issues that they're experiencing as a result of this. And they're more than 2 times likely than men or fathers, to worry about their performance on work because of caregiving. They also were 2.6 times more likely to be uncomfortable sharing their status as a parent than fathers were. And so I think it just reflects that obviously the burden is heavier on mothers right now. And you can see in the heightened data here that when it comes to communicating those issues, it's even more challenging right now. And of course, given the financial uncertainty, there are so many reasons why this made absolute sense to me when I saw this data. And I think that to your points, Anna, this is a call to, I think, all of us to be allies and to ensure that there's real leadership that's supporting, parents and mothers in particular who are dealing with this. So I wanted to chat a little bit about work that you all do kind of inside your professional lives. And obviously we heard your amazing CVs. There are a lot of extracurriculars as well. And I wanted to hear a little bit from you all about what your approaches have been in terms of balancing your work as lawyers and to your clients and balancing opportunities outside of the law firm or the organizations for whom you work or for which you work with your obligations to kind of the greater community. So not the work-life balance that we were just talking about, but a little bit of different kind of work and extracurricular work balance. Kim, would you like to offer your thoughts on this one first?
Sure. I would love to talk about this. I'm like the queen of the extracurricular activity. And actually right now I'm president of the International Women's Forum for DC, and Marna's a member, so I get to hang out with her there. I think that the extracurricular is a way to drive the main event, which is your profession. The other activities show other strengths that you have. I still remember when I clerked, there was a very prominent, and he eventually became a federal judge, very prominent lawyer at a really big law firm, and he could never remember me. It bothered me more than because he could remember my co-clerk, but he could never remember me. But he saw me speak at a bar function. And after that, to tell you how full circle this turned, I was in a restaurant in Georgetown and all you could see was like part of my profile. You couldn't really even see my face. I was with my mother, and of course now he's a federal judge. He comes over, oh, Kim, how are you? Da, 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 da. And my mother's like, my God, how did he even recognize you? Like you can only see like part of your face and you don't have makeup on. And it was hysterical, but it was because he saw me in this other place. You know, sometimes when people see you at work all day, every day, they only get to see, right, the persona who's at work. But if you have to lead a meeting for the bar, or you have to chair a dinner, or lead a committee that makes a change in the court, it gives people an opportunity to see more nuanced parts of your personality. And so those activities can drive really giving you a boost in your career. I think the key though is, you know, people always talk about balance as if balance comes from outside of you. Balance comes from within. The world is never going to stop and say, oh, Kim, did you have too many hours of work today? Do you need a break? Or, oh, Kim, you know, I think you could use a little more exercise today to clear your mind. You know, it's not going to do that. You've got to drive it from internally, and your balance might not look like my balance. You have to know what yours is. And I found that if mind, body, spirit is out of whack, one of them will bring it to my attention, right? So if I'm not taking enough time to exercise, I will feel it. You know, my body will be more tired. I won't want to do all the things I did. Or if my mind isn't getting a break, I'm not as creative or patient as I might be, because now I'm irritable because my mind is not clear. And then of course your spirit. You always have to be feeding your spirit, because you're right, everybody doesn't have the same attitude. And sometimes, Jeannie, I probably still get a lot of those things you get where, you know, people aren't sure who you are or why you're there or what you do. You know, it's nothing more fun than when you say you're the lawyer for someone and they go, now tell me again what it is you do. Explain for me what that means. You know, so you have to have a certain amount of patience and calm to be able to really do that. But that comes from you. That balance starts with you, and you have to always know what it will take to put you back in whack. Your family can't do that for you. Your husband can't do that for you. Your colleagues can't do that for you. Only you. But you're the only one who knows what that looks like. And so that's what you should strive for, is keeping yourself in balance.
That's fantastic. And this full disclosure, this question is a very subtle sell for people to become more involved in the Women's Bar Association, so they can understand the many ways that being involved in extracurricular activities, just to put it out there. We're getting towards the end of the series. I think we all know what we're doing here, right? The Women's Bar Association is great. And there are lots of ways that extracurriculars can be important, even if they are, they are part of a complex balance that we're all trying to strike right now. Marna, I think you also are the queen of extracurriculars, and the queen of firsts in many of these regards. So I would love to hear a little bit of your thoughts regarding how you strategized, if you strategized, and what that balance looked like for you.
Well, I had to kind of practice, which was very stressful. I mean, you can't represent people in divorces where they're about to lose their children or their house without taking in all of their stress, and yet you have to be calm. But I realized that if I just had that on my plate, I couldn't do that. I needed a full platter of different kinds of activities, very similar to what Kim said, to be able to do the other things, meet other people, deal with other issues in order to make everything balanced. And right now, what I've learned, I've retired. I have just moved to a large retirement community that has just doubled in size. And I've taken exactly the same skills I had then and have gotten involved with governance of this whole new community. And it's the same skills and meeting all of these new people. And it's like they all have resumes to die for, but we're all in the same place. We're all new. We're all just beginning retirement. Nobody knows where it's going to lead. And you just dive in like you do with your law practice and your other activities. You find your own balance and use your own skills.
I have to imagine that the stories that you all are exchanging are so incredible. And I'm sure that the stories about Washington in particular and what you all are talking about, I would love to be a fly on the wall because I'm sure there are some really, really great stories. And how lucky are they, Marna, to have you working on governance issues for them? That's a lucky group. Anna and Jeannie, I want to make sure that I open this up to you before we start to kind of wrap up with some closing thoughts.
Sure. So I don't know if this is a terrific life's hack or really sad, but I try to make sure that any of my sort of groups that I'm involved with outside of work involve friends, so that at least when I'm involved in that group, I have time to see them. And that makes it so I can, do two things at once, which is catch up with my friends, gossip, whatever, but also, do whatever board activity or group activity we're doing. One of my closest friends, Dee Martin, and I are on the board of a group that meets twice a year, met twice a year, back in the olden days in California. And I have to say, making time to fly out to California for a board meeting twice a year, given our schedules, is insane. But I've actually come to cherish it because for 5 hours on the plane going out and 5 hours coming back, I get uninterrupted time with one of my closest friends to catch up and hang out. And it's time that, we would never be, even if we wanted to, we wouldn't be able to scratch out for ourselves, given families and, work and other commitments. So I think that's like a good thing to do is combine your friends with the things that you like to do in the community, and you'll have a great time doing it, and you'll be able to give back to your community at the same time.
I think that's a great life hack. That's fantastic. Jeannie, do you have any thoughts on extracurriculars that you would share?
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes back to something that you were saying came out of the workshops where for me, as a young lawyer, I think I artificially demarcated work with not work, right? And I tried to spend a disproportionate amount of time on what I called work without a full appreciation, as Kim put it, that it's all holistic, right? And that especially as you get older, you realize for every matter that is up for grabs, there are 1,000 qualified lawyers whose work is exceptional. And so you don't get hired just on the work alone. You get hired for bringing your very best self to it. And that requires an authenticity, right? And a holistic self, one that has an extracurricular life, that has a family, that has a spiritual life, that has roundness and richness, so that when you do and when you are engaged in a matter, you are bringing your very best self. So that has been hard learned for me because I tend to really suck at the work-life balance and or the extracurricular demarcation, but it's something that I very much strive towards. And I came to this lesson a little too late in life.
Never too late.
So I'm going to end with what I think is probably the toughest question, but I gave you all these questions in advance, so hopefully it's not going to be a surprise. I wanted to hear from each of you what a question is that you are asked about being other in the legal profession, being a woman in the legal profession, being a person of color in the legal profession. What question about that being other that you hear on a regular basis that you wish you never had to answer again? And if there's an answer you could give, it's, like the old Seinfeld version of like coming up with your retort, a half hour later after the conversation's ended, right? What is the question and what is the answer? And Marna, because you have been the first woman and the only woman, I'm sure, in many rooms throughout your career, I was hoping that you would kick us off with this question.
I thought about that. First of all, I didn't understand what the other was, so I couldn't quite grasp the question. But I thought about an incident that when I was first DC bar president, they had afternoon talk shows in DC, and they were always looking for somebody to talk with. And I was invited to this talk show, and the woman was asking different questions, and then she looked at me and she said, have you always wanted to be president of the DC bar? And I just thought, what? And I said, no, I always wanted to be Miss America. And that ended it.
Marna, you told me that story, and I was really hoping that you would be able to work it in this evening, and I am just delighted that it made the cut. Oh, goodness. I will tell you, when we were speaking, and Marna, this also had me in stitches, and I think it's very of the moment to mention this. When we were doing a little bit of rehearsal and we were dealing with some Zoom issues, and one of our other panelists was on 2 Zoom panels at once, Marna pointed out that that was what had recently gotten someone else in the legal profession in a little bit of trouble, and I nearly fell out of my chair laughing. So I knew you weren't going to bring that up, but it was just the funniest thing that has happened to me this week, and I had to share it with the group. Kim, what are your thoughts on this one? I know you and I actually had a more robust back and forth about this one, so hopefully you've been able to give it some thought.
I did, and I don't know that I always get the same question. I just get, like you said, you just get a lot of surprise. I'm hoping the day will come when I walk in the room and there won't be all this sort of surprise. Like how did you get? I mean, really, you feel people technically wanting to ask you, how did you get here? Like, how did this happen? I want you all to know that if I were to go back through the thousands of depositions I took when I was at a firm, you would see in almost every transcript a moment when the witness, whether they're a neurosurgeon or whether they're an architect or whether they're an artist, a moment where they turn to me and they go, "Where did you go to law school?" If I never get asked that question ever again, and I love my law school, let me just say I'm on the wall. If you go to University of Virginia, you'll see me on the wall, and it's a good day. So it's a great picture, so I love that it's there. But I get asked that, and I mean, I'm at an age now where if you're asking where I went to law school, you're in such a wrong ballpark. You're not only are you not going to get an answer that you can use to do anything, you will learn nothing about me. And I'll tell you what's really funny about this is I never would answer it. So if you asked me in the deposition where I went to law school, I would say, we'll get to that. And of course, as you all know, if you're the person taking the deposition, when it's over, you say it's over, no further questions, and then everybody else says it, and then you leave. You don't sit and chit-chat with the witness. There's no reason for me to tell them where I went to law school, and I'm not there to answer questions. That's not what my client wants me to do when I'm there. So for me, I think when the day comes that there isn't so much surprise. Now, I recognize that every benefit has a burden, that when I lose that surprise, I will also lose the element of, I know who I am and what I can do. And when you underestimate me, it really is to your detriment. So I kind of don't want to lose that, because that's just so much more fun. But this question where people are asking this, it's just, sometimes you just want to go, give it up. I mean, I said I was a lawyer. If you don't believe me, that's one thing, but to have to take me all the way back to law school, it's just a tad crazy.
Well, I'm adding to the list of rooms that I would like to be a fly in would be to be in a room, Kim Keenan, when you are taking someone's deposition would be one of the most entertaining days of my life. I am confident of that. I'm so confident of that. Obviously, everyone in this panel, I'm sure, would delight me with their deposition skills. So it's an impressive club, but that sounds like a lot of fun, I have to tell you. Jeannie, what's a question that you get asked that just makes you roll your eyes every time?
It's a corollary to Kim's. It's the, how did you get this job? The like, lady, what are you doing here?
Walking down the street, Jeannie, and they said, you know what? We could use another, and we think we want a woman. Oh, we want a woman of color. Jeannie, your number's up. Come on in.
Seriously, come on down. I mean, I also don't answer that question. I just intentionally look confused and act as if I don't understand the question.
Very well. Anna, we will end this with you.
Yeah, so mine also involves depositions. this doesn't happen as much now that I'm over 40, but for a long time when I took depositions, I would come into the room, set up, walk out and come back in, and it would be me and usually a bunch of men, and I would start sitting down, you know, at the part where the person questioning is going to ask the deposition questions, and people would not unregularly say, "Oh, are you the one taking my deposition?" I always had the same response. "Why, yes, I am." And this one time an expert actually turned to my male colleague who sat down next to me and said, you know, wow, I'm glad that you're not the one taking the deposition. And she is. And I knocked him on his ass.
I bet he regretted that.
Within an hour. I mean, he was, by the end of it, you know, he was, I basically had confirmed that he'd forged part of his report. So he was sweating by the end of it. But, you know, to come to what you were saying, I never correct it because I'd rather them underestimate me than not. But by the end of it, they're not underestimating, you know, who has just taken the depo. And I think sometimes answering the questions, all you can do is do your very best and show them that not only do you belong in the room, but you belong in it a lot more than they do. And maybe they'd wish that my colleague next to me had taken the depo instead by the end of it.
We told some of those stories in the event that we had last week, and some of our panelists, we coalesced around the theme of countering these types of biases and underestimation with countering with excellence. And there is no more powerful response to the kind of bias or the assumptions that are built into all of those questions than to just showing up everybody in the room and making it clear by the time you all leave that their assumptions were ill-founded. I shared a story similar to that where I actually ran into one of the lawyers who the group had asked me, the expert had asked me for coffee on the way in. We all know that story. I'd run into him a couple weeks later at the airport with a girlfriend as I was getting ready to go to the beach. And he came up to me and in front of my friend said, I didn't get the chance to tell you this after the deposition because the whole team was there, but that was one of the best depositions I've ever seen. And please don't share it with anyone that I told you that. That was... I share it with everybody, but I don't identify him by name around town. So this has been such a lovely evening, and it has been just such an honor for me to share the Zoom screen with all of you and to have you in the virtual room with us. And what a wonderful, wonderful way to finish this 3-week series on women and leadership. So I want to thank you first of all for being here with us this evening, and thank everyone who has joined us, of course. It's hard to believe that we've only spent a couple hours together, given all the real estate that we've covered. You know, we saw the incredible work that our foundation is supporting in the community. We heard from that outstanding high school student with her speech about the inherent bias in dress codes that I actually thought dovetailed really nicely, Jeannie, with some of the remarks that the judge was sharing about the work that you were doing in law school. And I thought, this is terrible that we're still having these conversations, but it is somewhat hopeful to see young women like that who are giving these issues such critical thought, and it does give me hope. It was wonderful to hear from you, Jeannie, as we honored you as our Woman Lawyer of the Year, obviously a few months later than we had expected to do. And obviously we would have loved to have done it under the big columns at the National Building Museum with 600 friends, but was not to be in this year. If we were at the annual dinner, which this event is sort of intended to stand in the place of, I would now be talking to you about what the theme for the bar year is that we are about to kick off. But obviously the bar year is well underway. And as you know, we've actually been incredibly busy this summer since the bar year started on June 1st. I think that I will have the longest bar year, and I am excited for it, even though I may not see anyone in person during the entirety of my bar year. We are still optimistic about next May. But since I have you for just a few minutes longer, I wanted to remind you all what the theme for our bar year is, which is the importance of allies and friends. Our programming so far has been really focused on allyship, how we can use our talents in support of one another, and to be actively anti-racist. And we are incredibly proud of what we've been able to do thus far this year. And we're excited for events that are coming up in the future. In addition to my earlier shameless plug about how great it is to be involved in the Women's Bar Association, I will now include my regular shameless plug about becoming a member of the Women's Bar. If you are not, let me just close with a personal invitation for you all to become a member. I have been a member of the WBA since I was a third-year law student at GW, and it has been such an incredible part of my development as a lawyer. You do not need to be a woman, and you don't need to be a lawyer to be a member. You just need to support our mission of advancing and protecting the interests of women lawyers. So one final thought before I bid you farewell: please vote. And I look forward to being with you all soon. And again, the biggest thank you to our panelists tonight and for all of our speakers. What a wonderful evening. Thank you again for being with us.
That's great.